I was 17 when I first experienced how trauma can affect sleep. I was coming to the end of a wild time of drugs, gangs, and all-night raves that would eventually lead me to the spiritual path, but not before a game-changing final initiation. An accidentally large dose of psychedelics led to a full-on near-death experience that left me with panic attacks, nightmares, and flashbacks, all the hallmarks of what I can now see was most probably post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. After months of recurring nightmares, it was my burgeoning practice of lucid dreaming, becoming conscious in a dream and directing the dream at will, that eventually integrated them, and my new practice of mindfulness that calmed the daytime panics. Since then, I've spent a large part of my life learning, sharing, and building on those dream work and mindfulness practices that saved me from losing my mind 20 years ago. I formally became a Buddhist at the age of 19 and ended up living in the London Samazon Buddhist Center for 7 years and writing 3 books on dream work and shadow integration. I started teaching sleep and dream practices professionally in 2008, and I soon found that more and more people working with nightmares and trauma were turning up at the workshops. In many cases, the techniques they learned helped to reduce or often completely integrate their nightmares. But I also noticed that there was another crucial factor at play too: shared experience. My own first-hand knowledge of trauma nightmares seemed to help people to trust that the practices that I was offering could and would work. There was a kind of mutual kinship that you only feel when you meet someone who has known a similar pain. You can see it in each other's eyes, and you often share a look that says, "You too? Yeah, I know that place." At a retreat that I was running in 2013, I met a man named Keith Mackenzie. As he told me about his nightmares, I felt that familiar kinship, but as I looked into his eyes, I realized that this time, I didn't know that place. And no wonder. Keith was a veteran of the British Army's Parachute Regiment, as well as a retired firefighter with 20 years' service. He had been to places that I could never know. Keith had quite a breakthrough at that retreat, as he was able to, in his words, integrate more of my PTSD in that 4-day retreat than in 4 years of therapy. A few years later, when Keith had become a fully trained mindfulness meditation teacher and armed forces Buddhist chaplain, he asked me if I would come to one of the mindfulness retreats that he had organized for military veterans and teach them the same techniques. I had no idea whether the sleep and dream techniques that had worked for Keith would work for other veterans, but I was keen to try. From the off, I knew that when working with veterans, the goals would be very different from when working with civilians. Our main focus would be on sleeping better and integrating nightmares. No complex lucid dreaming techniques or esoteric Buddhist theory, just a simple focus on sleeping soundly and safely. The most common ways of working with troubled sleep are to change either the symptoms through medication or the external conditions through sleep hygiene. Both of these are like changing the weather but not changing the climate. For people who are not experiencing high levels of stress or trauma, this might work quite well. But for those who were, I realized it was necessary to change the actual climate of their sleep, rather than just help them weather the current storm. The sleep and dream practices worked well, and most of the veterans benefited from them. Even those who didn't connect so much with them did find deep relief in the breath and bodywork practices that the trauma-informed yoga and qigong teachers were offering on the retreat. So I saw that those practices were just as important for regulating sleep as the ones that I was offering. The veterans' retreats touched me deeply. Some of the stories the veterans told and the nightmares they shared will be forever etched on my memory. Those men and women bore their scars with a courage and dignity I hadn't dreamed possible.